Welcome to Nazir Fears, where fear finds you. Do you dare to enter a world of unspeakable horror and chilling mysteries? If you love creepy true stories, urban legends, haunted places, and terrifying experiences, you're in the right place.
Like, subscribe, share, and click that bell icon.
The Janitor Who Disappeared at Midnight, Part 1. Thomas Weaver had worked as the night janitor at Holloway High School for nearly 7 years. He was no stranger to empty hallways, flickering lights, and the occasional creak of an old building settling. Yet on that one night in late October, Thomas encountered a darkness that was different, alive, intentional, and deeply menacing. He arrived at the school just before midnight, carrying his mop bucket, cleaning supplies, and flashlight. The autumn wind rattled the old windows, sending thin sheets of cold air across the silent corridors. Thomas set down his supplies in the main office, glancing around the dimly lit space. The fluorescent lights buzzed, some flickering intermittently, creating shadows that seemed to stretch unnaturally across the walls. He began his usual rounds, starting in the west wing. The hallways were empty, lockers closed, the smell of polished wood and old cleaning chemicals filling the air. Thomas pushed the mop cart, its wheels squeaking faintly on the linoleum floors. He paused at the gymnasium, noticing the faint echo of his own footsteps. Something felt off. He couldn't quite place it. Shrugging, he continued toward the science labs. As he walked past the chemistry room, a faint scratching noise echoed from inside. Thomas stopped, listening. The sound grew louder, more deliberate, like fingernails scraping against a chalkboard. He approached the door cautiously, flashlight trembling in his hand. He peered through the small window in the door, but the room appeared empty. The scratching stopped. Shaking his head, Thomas muttered to himself about the wind or rats, and continued. He reached the library, his usual late-night cleaning spot. As he pushed open the heavy doors, a cold draft hit his face. The air inside was icy, unusual for the building. Rows of bookshelves cast long shadows, and the faint hum of the fluorescent lights created an oppressive atmosphere. Thomas began dusting the shelves, but something made him glance toward the back corner. A figure stood there, tall, indistinct, and pale. Thomas froze. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It seemed to be watching him. Thomas's heart raced. "Hello?" he called, voice trembling slightly. The figure remained silent, unmoving. He approached slowly, but as he drew nearer, it vanished into thin air. Thomas blinked, unsure if he had imagined it. He tried to calm himself, telling himself the exhaustion was playing tricks on his mind. He finished dusting the shelves and moved to the cafeteria, mopping the floors in long, deliberate strokes. The silence was broken only by the squeak of his mop and the occasional distant sound from outside the building. As he cleaned, Thomas noticed a shadow moving across the far wall, fast, almost imperceptible. He froze. The shadow halted suddenly and then dissipated. Thomas's pulse quickened. He decided to check the janitor's storage room, where cleaning, supplies, and old equipment were stored. The door creaked loudly as he opened it. Inside, the room was small and cluttered. As he swept his flashlight beam around, he noticed that one of the shelves had been disturbed. A mop bucket sat toppled over, water slowly spreading across the floor. Thomas frowned, certain he had left it upright. He heard the faint echo of footsteps above him, on the second floor. Thomas shook his head. No one should be here. He hurried toward the stairs. Ascending cautiously, he reached the second-floor corridor. The lights flickered more violently here, shadows dancing wildly along the walls. He walked slowly, listening. The footsteps seemed to follow him, but whenever he turned, the hallway was empty. Panic began to rise in Thomas's chest. He approached the doors leading to the administrative offices. The first office door opened with a reluctant groan. Inside, chairs were overturned, papers scattered across the floor. Thomas froze. The room looked as if someone, or something, had been there recently. He backed out slowly. The next office was worse. The walls were marked with scratches, long and jagged, as though someone had clawed them. Thomas's flashlight flickered, plunging him into near darkness. When it flickered back, a figure stood in the corner, pale, faceless, and tall. Thomas's voice caught in his throat. He stepped backward, tripping over a chair. The figure did not move, only watched. Thomas scrambled to his feet, heart hammering, and ran down the hallway. The shadows seemed to reach for him, stretching along the walls unnaturally. He reached the stairwell and descended rapidly. As he reached the main floor, the lights went out completely. Darkness enveloped him. He fumbled for his flashlight, which flickered weakly to life, revealing dozens of shadowed figures emerging silently from the walls. They surrounded him, moving like smoke, whispering his name in low, chilling tones. Thomas felt a cold hand brush his shoulder. He spun, but nothing was there. He ran toward the main exit, but the doors seemed to stretch farther than possible, the hallway lengthening as he approached. He slammed against the heavy doors. They did not budge. The whispers grew louder, now overlapping into a cacophony that rattled his mind. Thomas's chest burned, panic consuming him. In a desperate move, he ran toward the elevator in the lobby, hoping for escape. He pressed the button frantically. The elevator doors opened slowly. Inside, the metal was cold, lights flickering, display reading B1. Thomas stepped inside, pressing the lobby button repeatedly. The elevator shuddered, descended rapidly, then stopped abruptly. The doors opened to a corridor he did not recognize. The walls stretched infinitely, lined with doors that seemed to move when he wasn't looking. Shadowed figures glided silently through the hallway, faceless, whispering his name. Thomas realized with a sickening dread that he had entered a space outside reality. The janitor's usual school no longer existed. Only this endless, twisting labyrinth haunted by faceless figures remained. He ran, trying every door, finding only more hallways, more shadows, and more whispers. His flashlight flickered, weak, threatening to fail entirely. He felt hands brush against him from the darkness, icy cold and insubstantial. Thomas stumbled, falling to the floor, heart pounding, mind fraying. He tried to climb the stairwell again, but it twisted impossibly, each step leading him back to the same endless corridor. He screamed, the sound swallowed immediately by the oppressive silence and whispers. The figures multiplied, surrounding him, moving closer, always just out of reach. Thomas realized he was trapped. The building had become sentient, feeding on fear, stretching reality, keeping him captive. Every exit led to more corridors, every turn to more shadows. Exhausted and terrified, he sank to the floor, flashlight weak in hand. The whispers became a singular voice, commanding, insistent, "Stay, stay with us, forever." Thomas understood the truth. The school, the janitor's usual route, the empty halls, none of it mattered. He was now part of the building, absorbed into the darkness, and there was no escape. Part 2. Thomas Weaver remained huddled on the floor of the endless corridor, heart hammering, breath ragged. The whispering grew louder, now almost deafening. a chorus of voices that seemed to emanate from the very walls themselves. His flashlight flickered, casting distorted shadows across the floor and ceiling, making the faceless figures appear larger, more menacing. He tried to move, but each step seemed to stretch the hallway further, twisting space in ways that defied logic. Thomas realized he could no longer rely on his senses. He had no sense of distance or direction. Every corridor seemed identical, yet subtly wrong. Walls leaning, floors sloping impossibly. Desperation drove him forward. He sprinted past one door, then another, each opening into rooms filled with abandoned desks, overturned chairs, and papers floating as if suspended by an unseen wind. In one classroom, chalkboards were filled with symbols that made no sense, twisting and shifting under his gaze. He reached the stairwell, hoping it would provide a path back to reality. The steps spiraled upward endlessly. Thomas climbed cautiously, counting each step, but the numbers seemed to reset, the stairwell looping back into itself. Panic surged. He descended instead, only to find himself back in the same endless corridor with faceless figures gliding silently along the walls. The whispering intensified, now speaking directly to him. "Thomas, join us. You belong here." His pulse raced. The building was alive, aware of him, and determined to consume him. Thomas ducked into a janitor's closet, hoping for a moment of safety. Shelves of cleaning supplies surrounded him, the air thick and cold. His flashlight illuminated small details. The mop heads appeared to twitch as if alive. Buckets tipped over, water seeping unnaturally across the floor. He pressed his back against the wall, eyes darting, listening. A shadow passed in the doorway. Thomas froze, heart thundering. The figure paused, faceless, tall and silent, its presence filling the small closet. Thomas's mind screamed at him to run, but he knew there was nowhere to go. He could feel the building's influence, the malevolent force that had consumed the corridors, the stairwells, the classrooms, now reaching into the closet. Thomas left the closet in a desperate burst of courage, flashlight shaking in his hand. The hallways seemed to stretch even further, the doors multiplying, twisting, folding upon themselves. Faceless figures emerged from every shadow, moving closer, whispering, their tones shifting from enticing to threatening. He tried the elevator once more, the metal doors cold under his trembling hand. The display flickered, reading B1, then 13, then X, then 13B. He pressed the lobby button repeatedly. The elevator shuddered violently, descending faster than physics should allow. The floor numbers flashed unpredictably. The doors opened to a room unlike any part of the school he had ever seen. The floor was polished black, reflecting faintly distorted figures standing in the distance. Long shadows stretched impossibly, bending over walls and laposes and ceilings. Thomas felt the air thicken, cold and suffocating, carrying a metallic tang. He tried to step forward, but the floor seemed to shift beneath him, making him stumble. Figures moved silently toward him, faceless, gliding just above the floor. The whispers grew louder, now directly in his mind, not his ears. "You cannot leave. You are ours." Thomas ran, zigzagging through hallways that twisted like labyrinthine mazes. Each door led to another corridor, each corridor to more faceless entities. He felt hands brush against him from the darkness, icy and insubstantial, reaching, grasping, attempting to pull him into the shadows. Exhaustion overtook him. His legs shook, muscles burning, lungs gasping. Thomas fell to the floor, flashlight skittering away, casting fleeting light across the room. He crawled toward it, desperate to keep a small connection to reality, to cling to some thread of hope. The flashlight beam fell on a figure standing motionless, taller than the rest, the edges of its form blurred, almost shimmering. Thomas's chest tightened. The figure raised a hand slowly, pointing toward a door at the end of the hallway. Instinctively, he got to his feet, following the gesture, flashlight shaking violently. The hallway seemed to stretch endlessly, but he moved forward, propelled by fear and a desperate will to survive. The door at the far end opened with a low, resonant groan. Beyond it, a void stretched, darker than any night, colder than any winter wind. Thomas froze at the threshold. The faceless figures advanced, silently, whispering, pressing into the edges of the void. With no other choice, he stepped forward into the darkness. Immediately he felt himself falling, tumbling through a space that seemed to exist outside the normal world. Gravity became unreliable. Floors, walls, and ceilings twisted around him. Whispers roared, becoming a cacophony, overlapping, repeating his name in endless variations. Thomas tried to cry out, but his voice was swallowed instantly by the oppressive void. He tumbled endlessly, floating above floors that appeared and disappeared beneath him. The figures glided around, guiding, herding, consuming the space he tried to navigate. He reached for something to hold on to, anything to anchor himself. But there was nothing. The building had claimed him entirely. Exhaustion, terror, and despair merged. Thomas's vision blurred, the whispers consuming his thoughts, invading his mind, erasing distinction between self and surroundings. His flashlight flickered one final time, illuminating dozens of pale, faceless figures surrounding him, their hollow eyes fixed, waiting. The last vestiges of hope slipped away. Thomas Weaver understood, in the deepest marrow of his being, that he had vanished into the darkness forever, absorbed by the school, and that no one would find him. The janitor who had walked its halls nightly had disappeared at midnight, becoming part of the Holloway High School itself. Part 3. Thomas Weaver's consciousness drifted between reality and nightmare. The darkness around him was alive, shifting, twisting like smoke, filling every sense with an oppressive weight. He tried to move, but his body no longer obeyed. He could feel the building pressing in on him, reshaping itself around his fear. Every hallway, every staircase, every classroom had merged into one infinite labyrinth. The whispers continued, now speaking directly inside his mind. "Thomas, you belong here, forever." Panic surged, but even panic had limits. His mind strained to resist, but the building's will was stronger. He remembered his flashlight lying somewhere on the endless floor. With great effort, he crawled toward it. The beam flickered weakly, illuminating faceless figures converging silently around him. The air was frigid, carrying the metallic scent of rust and decay. Thomas tried to call out, but his voice was swallowed instantly. His own name echoed back at him, distorted, unrecognizable. Desperation fueled his movements. He ran, dodging figures, zigzagging through corridors that bent impossibly around him. Each door he opened led to another corridor, another infinite loop, never to the outside world. He understood, with a cold certainty, that the school had consumed countless others before him. The janitors, students, teachers, all lost, all absorbed into the building's malevolent consciousness. Shadows stretched from the walls, wrapping around him, tugging him into corners, into voids between floors, into spaces that should not exist. Thomas's flashlight flickered again, casting its last feeble light on a doorway glowing faintly at the end of a hallway. He ran toward it, the whispering now a roar, trying to drown out his thoughts, his memories, his very identity. He reached the door and pushed it open. Beyond was a room that defied logic. Black polished floors reflected dozens of faceless figures standing perfectly still, waiting. The ceiling stretched infinitely above, and the walls seemed to pulse like living skin. Thomas stepped in cautiously. The figures began moving slowly toward him, their motion deliberate, inhuman. Whispers intensified, forming a single commanding voice. "Stay with us, forever." He tried to retreat, but the door behind him vanished, swallowed into the endless darkness. Thomas ran, stumbling over floors that appeared and disappeared, over shadows that were almost solid. Each step was accompanied by icy hands brushing against his arms, invisible pressure pushing him forward, toward the faceless crowd. His heart pounded, sweat streamed down his face, his legs burned. He realized resistance was futile. The building had claimed him. He felt the last of his free will slipping away. A figure approached him, taller than the rest, edges shimmering, hollow eyes fixed directly on him. Thomas fell to his knees. The whispers penetrated deeper, erasing fragments of his memories, folding his identity into the building's consciousness. He felt his mind merging with the darkness, becoming one with the twisting halls, the staircases that led nowhere, the rooms that defied time. In a final surge of terror, Thomas tried to scream, but no sound emerged. He was no longer Thomas Weaver in the way he had been. He was a presence within Holloway High School itself, absorbed into the malevolent architecture. The faceless figures faded into the background, becoming part of the walls, the ceilings, the floors. His body vanished from the real world, leaving behind only a cold mop bucket, still upright, a faint echo of footsteps resonating in the empty hallways. Outside, Holloway High School appeared quiet, ordinary, its lights dimmed, its doors locked. The janitor who had kept its halls clean at night had disappeared at midnight, leaving only whispers in his wake. Those who passed by later reported a faint chill in the corridors, shadows that seemed to move just out of sight, and occasional distant echoes of footsteps that could belong to no living person. Students and staff never saw Thomas again. Yet those who dared enter the empty halls after dark spoke of a presence, someone sweeping, moving silently, mopping floors that should have been empty. Some claimed to see a pale, faceless figure watching from the corners of their vision. And if you listen closely, when the school is quiet, just past midnight, you can hear whispers calling his name. "Thomas, join us. Stay." Holloway High School had gained a new guardian, a janitor who would never leave, absorbed into the darkness forever, a warning that some places are not meant to be traversed alone at night.